bor Ping William Ato in Juba Malatori Hey yo Ping William Ato in Benti Wala Kwaju Hey wow Ping William Ato in Malkal Wala Pinyaram Ping William
Thank you so much, Lagos State Media Executive behind the scene. To our viewers, welcome to Lagos State Media Beyond Boundaries. It has been a while, and thank God we are all here today. And allowed me to welcome all of you to Lagos State Media. Tune in and keep sharing to many people. In the studio today, we have Professor Jok Madut Jok. And Professor has been away for some time now, and most of you are his followers on Facebook. You always see his writings and sharing of ideas on his personal page. But today, we really appreciate Prof for accepting our invitation to come and share his thoughts with the fellow South Sudanese and other nationals in regard to the topic at hand. Too many of you are now watching us, wherever you are, kindly share it. We really need many viewers to join. They can also listen to Professor Jok and also ask him some questions if you deem fit. That's some questions you want to throw in for our conversation. Reminder, we will not take much of your time. Our conversation actually will be within 45 minutes to 1 hour maximum. And we will try to stick to our word, because sometimes when the conversation is too long, it will take much of your time. It will become bored, and we know the internet issues in our country, especially South Sudan. And South Sudan is the pioneer audience of our conversations. Yeah, thank you so much. Permit me to give Prof time to give us his opening remark before we dive into our conversation of today. Professor, welcome, and the chance is yours.
Thank you very much, Majong Kurmalak, and thanks to Lagos State Media and all the people behind it. This is a great platform. If we can not document and our own experiences, our own history, our own current dynamics, nobody will do it for us. So I appreciate what Lagos State Media does in engaging with all of us. So I am delighted and honored to be hosted by Lagos State Media once again. And today we will be focusing on the recent statement issued by National Consensus Forum, but we will probably start with issues to do with updating our viewers, updating South Sudanese on the current affairs in our country, and some of the main challenges facing us today. And God knows we are facing a lot of problems. So we'll start with those, and then hopefully the viewers will also chime in with their questions and comments so that we can address those within the time allotted to us. So thank you, and let us begin.
Thank you so much, Prof. We really acknowledge and appreciate your inputs, and also giving us credit as Lagos State Media. We don't take it for granted. Such words are the ones that always keep us moving, and they will make us feel like we are doing something or contributing toward the development of our country. Thank you so much. Professor, the recent past, there has been silence on both ends, the oppositions and the government. And the only thing citizens have been saying is our many trips by the president moving outside the country, trying to organize the relations of our country with other countries.
Mm-hmm.
And on 16th of December 2023, citizens were surprised, actually, with statements of which you were part of the signatories to that document. And that is why we invited you to come and make some clarification as an academia in that regard. Professor, can you tell the viewers what is the National Consensus Statement and what does it contain? Thank you.
Okay. No, that is a great question. First of all, the National Consensus Forum is a sort of umbrella organization that brings together multitudes of South Sudanese groupings. Some of them are civil society, some of them are political parties, others are opposition movements, some in exile, some within the country. Some are armed and pursuing their political objectives through armed struggle. Others are non-violent, peaceful opposition, saying that South Sudan can be changed through dialogue, and we don't have to continue fighting each other. And so this National Consensus Forum brings together all these voices, and it brings them together not because they all agree. It brings them together because we have a conviction that South Sudanese voices of various political ideas, various ideological positions have to be heard, and they have to be in dialogue with each other. Because at the end of the day, we do believe, I personally believe, that a country where people are talking with one another is a country that is destined to thrive and to be peaceful. Because when people are talking, they don't have to fight. They don't have to be violent. And we know that our country has suffered from violence, whether it was violence of liberation struggles, which we have gone on for the last 200 years since the Turkey took over Sudan. And we are at a juncture in our history in South Sudan where so many of us say it is better we talk with each other rather than try to achieve our political goals through the barrel of the gun. We don't say to those people who have chosen to take up arms, we don't say to them that they are wrong. But we say to them that they should also talk to us, to everyone else, to everybody in South Sudan, to citizens and to government in South Sudan, even if they are fighting. Because taking up arms as a means of achieving political goals is not foreign to us. The very idea of South Sudan today as an independent country was achieved through armed struggle. So we cannot become independent through armed struggle and then turn around and say anybody taking up arms is wrong. But we say anybody taking up arms should also, in addition to fighting, allow room for a dialogue and conversation. Because in fact, in the end, it might be conversation and dialogue that will solve the problems that they have raised rather than them defeating somebody through the arms. We all know that our people have suffered too much and we don't want continuation of war. So the National Consensus Forum is an umbrella group of all these voices that feel marginalized, excluded, that feel that the country is going in the wrong direction, that the country is being ungoverned. If that country was governed, you would not have the ongoing Twitch and Ngok fighting today in Baragazal, in Warab state. You will not have Wow and Apuk fighting between Gorial East and Ju River state in Western Baragazal. You would not have the conflicts that are going on in northern Tonj, in Tonj North County and various places. You would not have the killing that is going on in Ye River State and in Kajukeji, particularly over the past several months. And so we say, let us prioritize conversation with each other, because we want to be able to talk to the government. As people in opposition, we need to be able to engage with the government of South Sudan, because the government of South Sudan is led by South Sudanese who are not our enemies. They are not enemies. They are brethren and sisters who we disagree with in the way the government is handling the affairs of the country. So why not prioritize conversations over fighting? So that is what the National Consensus Forum is. With regards to the statement which you have just referenced, which was issued yesterday, the NCF statement is very clear, it's long, but it states a very clear message about how far we have come as a country in terms of the struggles we have faced, how far we have come in terms of our collective action to vote and become an independent country. And then the Consensus Forum statement goes into the issues of governance, the problems facing South Sudan today. One of them, of course, is the inability and unwillingness of the current leadership of South Sudan to rein in violence, to the point where our people are still killing each other for no reason. And a country where the government is not able to monopolize the use of violence, is not able to rein in on violence, and people are dying without an accountability. We don't see any reason why that government should call itself a government if it cannot protect the very basics of life, including life itself. So we say in this statement that one of the problems that has led to this level of insecurity, of poverty, of exclusion from the world affairs, including the usual donor countries and donor agencies now saying that they can no longer lend money to South Sudan. The humanitarian action is now being reduced. The funding that we used to get from US, from UN, from UK, from other countries to feed our people, to give our people medical services and pay our teachers, all of that is now being reduced to less than half of what we were using, because all those donors are saying South Sudanese are not serious about running their country. The people in public office today, beginning from President Kiir at the top all the way to the bottom, are not being seen as serious by the rest of the world. They are not serious about governing their country. Otherwise, a country that has so much resources, with oil, with non-oil, with the land, with agricultural, with the cattle wealth, should not be fed by foreigners. And so we say in the Consensus Forum statement that we should sit down and talk. All the opposition people, all the armed groups, and the government. We should sit down and talk about how do we get our country out of this mess and put it on a path to progress in the way that our people have yearned for it, in the way that our resources give us the right to expect better services and expect good life and living standards and all of that. We have no reason to be poor and to be dying from hunger and dying from diseases that don't kill people anywhere else in the world in these days. Why should we have to live like that when we have everything that it takes for our people to live a better life? That is what the consensus is about. We are calling on the government of Salva Kiir Mayardit and the coalition government, the RCs, for us to sit down and try to figure out what has gone wrong. What is it that is wrong with South Sudan? Why is it like this? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof, for that explanation and for also being short and brief in regard to the summary of the whole statements of National Consensus Forum. The second question, Professor, is what are the aims of this National Consensus Forum or objectives? What do you want to achieve actually? Do you want to engage the government to have conversation with you? And what will be the end results? If assuming if government accept to sit down on the table with you, what is that idea that you want to bring on the desk? Thank you.
Yeah, so indeed, that is the aim, and that is we want the government to sit with all the various opposition groups and with all the civil society agencies and with all the individual public intellectuals, academics, and all of us. We are convinced that South Sudan is big enough for all of us. Nobody should feel excluded. Nobody should feel they don't have a say and don't have a voice. And we say, let us sit down. And if we sit down, what the National Consensus Forum has just issued is a program of action about that sitting down, about that dialogue. We will address some of the reasons why South Sudanese fight each other all the time. We will address some of the issues that have failed South Sudan as a country, including corruption, including violence, including the lack of justice and accountability, including the issues that give certain entities in the country, like the national security services, like the police, like judiciary, to act with impunity. When in fact the laws are very clear, our constitution is not a bad constitution. Our constitution suffers only from lack of implementation. So we say, let us sit down. If we sit down and talk about these things, we will definitely see where the problem is, and we will propose some of the solutions, including eventually being able to say, if that is the case, then what kind of government do we think should be in place in South Sudan that can address all these things? And we think that it is a democratic government that is needed, and that in order to achieve that democratic dispensation, there are several steps that we need to take. One of them is to end violence so that our people are not dying willy-nilly. One of them is to have a timeline that, like the so-called roadmap, which has been issued to replace the matrix for RC's implementation. That one is there and it can be implemented. The problem is that it is not being implemented. The parties to the RCs who then agreed on the roadmap are not serious and genuine about implementing the agreement, including not being genuine about doing the security arrangements and bringing all the fighting forces back and creating a unified force. They are not serious about simply having a genuine program and progress towards elections, because you cannot have elections without the logistical support. Right now, the country is broke, no money. And so that will probably come to, when the time comes for elections in 2024, as the SPLM keeps telling us, it will simply come to that point, and then they will say there is no money to do it. There is no security, so people will vote how if they cannot travel to the polling stations. We also know that these issues of constitution review process has not been done. We know we don't have census, so we don't know how many constituencies we will have, how many people will vote. And if we don't have this, it simply just makes it almost impossible for any of us to think that elections is coming. And as a result, we say, okay, let us sit down and talk about these things. It is better we sit down together, all the opposition people and the government, and we will solicit support from within the region and further afield into the international community to help us sit down and have a dialogue. And that dialogue will now chart the way forward, including restructuring the state. The South Sudan as a country has not been established. And we can use the national dialogue as a way to establish a credible, functioning state, and to also have a program for nation building in terms of the people's sentiments about their country. Right now, you have a lot of South Sudanese citizens who feel like there was really no reason for us to become independent from Sudan if all we get is the same things that we were experiencing in the hands of Northern Sudanese. What is the point of being independent? That program of nation building is a crucial program, and we have to discuss it, and we have to agree on creating our nation, because nations are made by its leaders and by its citizens. Nations are not born perfect. No nation is born, but all nations are made. And so we think the national dialogue can be a starting point for us making our own nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for that. Actually, when we look at the documents, the document obtained by state media, the signatories to the national consensus statement, which the group released yesterday, are the same faces that are actually engaging with the government under the Rome Peace Talk. Kindly, can you tell the viewers, Professor, what is the difference between the National Consensus Forum and the Rome Peace Talk, of which, when you look at the National Consensus Forum, you will see exactly the same people whom the government is engaging with them at the Rome, at least to bring them home, to have at least and prepare for the country toward the election. Thank you.
Yeah. No, it's a great question, and there was a similar question that was posted earlier on before we started about that exact same thing. What is the difference between the National Consensus Forum and that statement that they have made from the groups that have been engaging with the government in peace talks in Rome? But I say there is a big difference, and the main difference is the fact that those people who are in the Rome process, among the people that have signed these documents, there are three main ones. There is the real SPLM, led by Pagana Mom. There is the National Salvation Front, led by Thomas Cirillo. There is the
SAP.
The SAF. These groups that are under the umbrella called other parties, other political parties. And so you see those main 3 or 4 ones that are on the list here are the ones engaged in Rome, and they are increasingly becoming frustrated that the Rome process is not leading anywhere. And then there are all these other groups that are not part of the party to the Rome process, who are saying the Rome process is not leading anywhere, and we are also not party to it. So why? And then there is the issue of always creating a problem in our own country. We are fighting each other, and yet we keep looking to the rest of the world to solve our problem. When some of us say we don't need to go looking for mediators in IGAD, in EAC, in international community. We don't need to go looking for mediators when we know exactly what we need to say to each other. So the difference is that we, South Sudanese signatories to this document, are saying we can sit under the tree anywhere in South Sudan and we can solve our problems. We don't need to go looking for forums outside. Because when we bring in forums from outside, when we bring mediators from the international community, these mediators come in with their own philosophies, with their own interest, with attempts to influence our way of thinking. And we are saying, we are South Sudanese, we know each other. In fact, we may be even related to one another by blood. So if we sit together under any kind of arrangement like what the NCF is proposing, we will actually gain more traction towards peace if we are talking to one another without the outside mediation. If we need the outside help, maybe it might be a financial help so that people can come back from outside the country, so that people can travel from within the country if we decide that the meeting should take place outside South Sudan, in Kigali or Arusha or Addis Ababa or what have you. If we must sit outside the country because some people who are in opposition are still afraid for their own safety to go to Khartoum, to go to Juba. But we are saying that Juba is not we should meet in Juba, and that we only need the government of Salva Kiir Mayardit to assure us that these people, if they come to Juba, they will be safe, so that we can sit together and discuss without anybody fearing that they will be snatched by national security. So we want this meeting to take place in Juba. But if we all agree in the end that perhaps we should hold it outside Juba, then we will also agree on that, and the government will be okay with it, and we can go to Kigali or Addis or Nairobi or Kampala, wherever you, and we can meet there and solve our problem as South Sudanese without needing any mediation. I think that is the difference. The difference between what is going on in Rome and what is going on is being proposed by NCF is that this should be a South Sudanese-led process and not a foreign endeavor.
Thank you, Professor, for giving that answer in regard to the questions. That the difference between NCF and the Rome is that you want our problem to be addressed by South Sudanese themselves in their locality, not in a foreign country and seeking forum from the foreign countries, because those foreign countries come with a heavy cost.
Exactly.
And you want to cut the cost in that regard. Thank you so much, Professor. You are talking about you going to Juba if you all agree, and the government assured you that the security is up to date. You can come, let's sit in Freedom Hall and iron out the dispute and chart the way forward. Which one, Prof, according to you, as the member of NCF, what do you want the government to do now? Do you want the government to chant the Rome Peace Initiative and accept the NCF? Or do you want government to carry the two concurrently, considering the time frame now that is preparing, going for elections, and we are now like 2 to 3 weeks away, 2 weeks away actually to 2024. So which one do you prefer for the government to opt to? Thank you.
Well, for the time being, I don't think there is any problem with the government going concurrently, talking. Because, as I said, really my issue is that when people are talking with honesty and genuineness and with a sense of commitment to the welfare of our country, they will get somewhere. So I don't mind. Personally, I don't think it is a bad idea for the government to keep talking to their own people. But at the same time, if we carry on this other one, and this other one shows more promise and progressing rapidly, it will overcome the Rome one, and we will no longer need to go to Rome. We will just go with what we agree in our homeland. It would be best that we advance the consensus forum, the national dialogue, the roundtable conference. Let us advance it to the point where it will overtake all the other processes that are going on outside the country. The government is in a position of power. Yes, they can decide to sit with us, or they can decide not to. It is they have now a much leeway than any of us, because it is the government which is in control of the apparatus of the state. It is the government which is inside the country, and all these other opposition groups are outside. So the National Consensus Forum document recognizes the upper hand that the government has. But the government now is challenged to make a choice. Are you going to feel that you are powerful and mighty and continue to run the country the way you've been doing it without the rest of us? Or are you recognizing that there is a need for Junubin to come home and talk with us so that we find a seminal and final solution to the problems that are facing us. I think the government would be best advised to take the latter and not the former. Because the former, the idea that the government is powerful and it is taking control of everything and it is going to move ahead with its own agenda, means that South Sudan will not be stable. It means that all these groups that are fighting will continue to fight, because nobody is going to accept to just surrender their rights just because the government is powerful. So we are saying, why don't we recognize the fact that the government has the upper hand in these political military dynamics? But despite that upper hand, the government should also recognize that even when opposition is weak and small, it can still cause havoc in the country. It can still prevent the country from progressing. So what is the value in the government saying I'm mighty and powerful and I'm going to keep going on with the same problem, even though our people are suffering because of the unhappiness of some people who feel excluded? There will be no point. So the point is for the government to recognize that, yes, I'm powerful, but I think it is important to convince these other guys as well to come in so that we join hands and build our country without fear, without violence, without exhaustion of our resources. Like now, there are places that are not being productive. People are not farming. People are not fishing. People are not herding their cattle and selling them for the benefit of our country because of violence. So, and it is because of this violence, that is why, partly the reason why the country is broke. Partly the reason why the country is not able to maximize the generation of revenue. And so it doesn't help anyone, whether you are strong or weak. At the end of the day, the country is still going to be weak and nobody will benefit, except maybe for a few who have their hands in the pot of the national revenue. Like now, people are not being paid, as you said in your introductory remark. People are not being given their salaries since July. And the other day, the Minister of Finance announced that they are going to pay the salary for August. And we are only, 14 days away from the end of the year. And you have not paid July, August, September, October, November, and December, 6 months. And people are going into holidays. When our children, our families are expecting to have a decent meal on Christmas Day, and they will not be able to afford it. And it's all because of what? Not because we don't have resources, but because of mismanagement. And I think the National Consensus Forum dialogue calls for fixing the way we manage our resources so that our people don't have to be employed but unable to receive their salaries.
Thank you, Prof. Actually, we'll move to the next questions. You have mentioned like the main theme of your forum is to make sure you discuss the whole issues of the country, the security aspect, the economy aspect, and how the country should transit from the transition to the democratic nations through elections. Considering all this, Professor, now the elections tells us, or the documents of roundtable, or not roundtable, I mean the roadmap.
Right.
The roadmap indicated that by the end of 2024, we should be having the elected government in place.
Right.
And the government is actually, you have seen some of the rallies being conducted across the country by the ruling party, which is the SPLM. And up to now, they're still maintaining their ground that we are ready for elections. Now you have National Consensus Forum and the Rome Initiative. And all these things need to be addressed before elections. Do you believe the government will have time to make sure all these things are discussed and agreed upon by the oppositions and the government, and then we move for the elections? That is about time. Second to that, do you believe the government is having to facilitate the three? facilitates the internal agreements, which is revitalized peace agreement, that brings other political parties and the IO together with the SPLM. I remember there are some parties that said we are not ready for election, especially the IO and some of the few members from other political parties which are part of the current government. And you, the oppositions outside, some of you said we go for elections, some of you said we should not go for elections simply because there are some 1, 2, 3 things that have not yet been done by the government. Kindly, can you share your thoughts in that regard? Thank you. Unmute yourself.
Sorry.
Prof.
Sorry, yes, thank you for that question. I think this is really the gist of the matter. The fact that we already know that that RCS has dragged its feet in terms of implementing the steps towards political transition, culminating in elections. So much that we are now 12 months away from the proposed elections, and so many of us feel that there is really not enough time to do everything that needs to be done in order to hold elections in a credible way. And still, we say if there was political will and genuineness, we can still pull off the elections. And we think that elections should happen. A lot of people, even in opposition, think that elections should happen because it is the moment to call our own bluff. It is the time for us to challenge each other, to challenge one another, challenge our country, ourselves, and say, let's hold elections. It will, because we have never had elections since we became an independent country. So how do we know the elections we will hold are going to be bad elections or good elections, since we don't know? We have never held any. So let's do it. Let's hold elections. If it gives the government of Salva Kiir Mayardit legitimacy that it doesn't deserve because of the way that they might rig the elections, they will influence the process. SPLM is already campaigning, and other political parties are not allowed to campaign. This already shows that maybe this election will already be pre-rigged. It's rigged before it even happens. So if that happens, at least we will have shown the world that we are not capable of clean elections. But there may also be a chance where, okay, if the presidency is taken by Salva Kiir, we might also be able to have a legislature which is made up of other political parties who can then challenge the executive. And that will create a democratic space. Even if it doesn't change power, it will at least give a space for other people to be heard. So we think elections should move forward. The problem, of course, is it really feasible logistically? And that is a question that none of us has a clear answer to. The government itself says yes. The rest of us are seeing all these problems that have not been done, and we say probably not. But let's push forward with that. So the government can afford, if it can afford to do the elections through their allies, through their donors, let us move forward with those elections. But can we hold elections at the same time as we try to have a national dialogue? And what would be the national dialogue used for if there is a parallel process? And so we say, if the national dialogue carries on all the way to the time of elections without producing results, it will have at least contributed to the conduct of elections in some ways, like bringing in those political parties and those opposition groups. They will have come into the country, and they might also contest. So there will be no loss in terms of having parallel programs, because we are thinking if the national dialogue is going to happen and the government agrees, we can get money from the international community to help us sit down and talk. So the government doesn't have to pay for the national dialogue, I don't think. the government can pay for elections. So in short, the answer to your question about whether we can afford to have 3 parallel processes underway, the national dialogue, the elections, the implementation of RCs, can we afford to do this at the same time? I think we can. If there is genuine political willingness and political will, we can do things. If we fail along the way, at least everybody will have seen where we have fallen short. And it will no longer be a matter of us trying to trick each other. It will no longer be a trickery. It will just be a matter of logistical difficulties. And everybody will have seen it. And I don't think that we can fight over that. I think we would be in a position to recognize that we are all trying to do our best for the welfare of our country. And if we fall short, let us go to the drawing board and start all over again and be able to excuse each other and recognize the challenges that we are facing as a country and not kill each other over the failures to implement things.
Thank you so much, Professor. We have only 2 questions, of which these 2 questions are general questions, whereby we seek for your wisdom and understanding of dynamic world affairs. The first one, Prof, is in case if the country does not go for an elections, how do you see South Sudan after 2024? Do you see a chaotic country? Do you see a better South Sudan? Or do you think we'll be having another extensions of 3 years? This bureaucratic government in place now of 600 something MPs and all governors and ministers. What do you think about that in case if we don't go for an election? Thank you.
Yeah. No, this is the question on everybody's mind. If we don't hold elections in 2024, what would South Sudan look like? And the whole world is asking that same question. If we don't hold election in 2024, we will not wake up one day in December 2024 and decided we cannot hold elections. I think we will have been thinking about it all along. Like beginning from now all the way to 12 months, we are thinking about it. So if we reach a space and time along the way where it looks like elections cannot be held because of logistics or because of political stalemate, then at that time we will make a choice whether to extend the interim period, which I think most South Sudanese don't want, or if we say, let's create an interim government through the national dialogue, which is why the national dialogue is important. If we decide along the way that we cannot hold elections, let us see. First of all, the extension is not acceptable to a lot of people in South Sudan because it will be extension of the same problems that we are having now. So what would the extension produce? Nothing. So we say the alternative then is for us to create a government, an interim government, which is made up of technocrats. And this has been called for within the national dialogue, that in the end, and it is not this is the point where I disagree with the statement itself, calling for a technocratic government. Because calling for a technocratic government is a product of national dialogue. If we don't have national dialogue and agree on it, how do we get it? Obviously, we cannot force the government of Salva Kiir out of office and replace it with technocratic government if the government of Salva Kiir does not agree. And so we should not put it as a condition. We should put it as an outcome of the dialogue. So we say, along the way, if we decide that elections is just too difficult for us to hold, why not discuss the possibility of creating a government made up of technocrats? There will be no need for a large cabinet. There will be no need for a large parliament. We will have civil servants running the country for 1 year while they plan for general elections now. And that would be the middle ground. I think, but failing any of that, failing a technocratic government, failing in elections, failing anything else, South Sudan is going to be in a serious trouble, including the possibility of falling apart violently. And that is an eventuality none of us should wish for.
Thank you so much, Professor. The last questions to our viewers. If you have any questions, put it under the comment sections, and the president of Lagos State Media, Isaac Chiang, will be in a position to display those questions for the answers from the Prof. The last question, Professor. Our president recently was actually appointed to be the chair of East Africa Community. What is your take on that? Will this position give South Sudan some credit to the regional issues? Will it actually contribute to our political will? Will it put presidents in a better position of him making decisions that will chart the way forward for the country? Or what do you think about that positions being given to South Sudan? Thank you.
I don't think giving the presidency of EAC to President Kiir is going to add anything to our welfare as a country. And there are many reasons for this. One main reason is that even the very idea that we should be in the EAC was a decision made on emotions and not on a real study about what benefits accrue to South Sudan and what obligations are brought on South Sudan. That decision was not made in a credible, better studied way. And so the fact that the president becomes the chairman of the EAC for the 1 year does not add anything to South Sudan. On the contrary, I would say it hurts South Sudan in particular one way, and that is the fact that it opened South Sudan to a free flow of East African goods since we rely on imports. And as a result, it will suppress our interest and ability to produce anything for the market. We will not manufacture anything since we are receiving goods from Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, all these countries. And we are receiving labor force from these countries. And so it will not, our existence in EAC does not really make us equals with the other countries. It makes us the underdog in that whole arrangement. So I think South Sudan really needs to review its membership in the EAC to see what it adds to our welfare as a country. In my view, it doesn't. The president being chairman of EAC is probably diplomatically being seen as a kind of acceptance and equality. But in terms of benefits accruing to the people of South Sudan, there is nothing. And there is also the issue of our own president being somebody who is personally incapable of managing that position. You saw the embarrassing situation where he was addressing the summit in Arusha last month, and he could not even pronounce the names of his colleagues who are presidents of East African heads of state, and he could not remember who was president of which, mixing up president of Paul Kagame with Suluhu, and so forth and so on. So in a sense, that is a minor issue. I think that is an issue that can be managed through the Secretariat and through our representation. We have the Ministry of East African Affairs, Deng Alor, and Gideon, Ben Gideon, who was the Undersecretary. They can also prepare the president to manage his position well, but on that occasion, it was very embarrassing to the nation, the way the president conducted the meeting. So I think, I don't want to be long on this issue. I simply think that the EAC membership has not come with any visible and tangible advantages to the people of South Sudan. On the contrary, it hurts South Sudan in terms of us being beholden to the East African community, which we are not equal in, in which we are the weakest of the entire group, and it makes us simply continue to be consumers of East African goods, and we are not contributing to the East African market in any meaningful way, not in terms of labor and not in terms of supplies, of manufactured supplies.
Prof, do you mean like South Sudan, Somalia, and DRC will become the weakest, the East Africa region or East Africa community bloc? Or what actually were you mean? Is it because we'll be receiving a lot of workers from East Africa flowing to South Sudan, taking over the jobs, NGOs, and also even the government sector, and South Sudanese will remain jobless? Or is it because in terms of imports, since South Sudan economy depends heavily on East Africa?
It's in both ways. In terms of commodities that we buy, South Sudan is almost 90% import dependent, which means it stifles our capacity to develop our own manufacturing, because we already buy what has been manufactured by others. So we kind of become addicted to the imports rather than trying to manufacture our own. So it stifles our economy in that way. But it also limits our capacity when we can, if you want a mechanic, somebody who just fix a car, somebody who fix our electricity, and we don't train our own people. All the technical institutes in South Sudan are still closed down since the time of the old Sudan. We are not training our technicians. So what you get are Ethiopians, are Eritreans, Kenyans, people from Uganda, even all the way to the village where I was born and live. Right now you have Ugandans laying bricks and doing the construction, and they are not training our people. So we will always remain addicted to the labor supply and the commodity supply from the region, and that will not afford us the opportunity to build our own and to develop our own so that we can be competitive. And so we are simply now a member of a regional trade bloc, which is not contributing to the bloc, and instead is simply receiving from the bloc.
Thank you, Professor, for that clarification. I think up to this juncture, we have come to the end of our discussions. And if there is any questions from Clubhouse or comment sections, of which I was informed rightly by Isaac Young Paul that there is no question under the comment section. Okay. And I don't know that the Clubhouse is having one. And if not, then I will give you time to give us your final remark and your message to the people of South Sudan. Now they are moving to the Christmas period. And some of them, as you said earlier, expect to have a decent meal during that day. Since Christmas is about sharing love among the people and with your own people. So you will have your message on that. And also your final words in regard to the NCF. What do you want to say to the government of South Sudan? Thank you so much, Prof. The chance is yours.
Thank you so much. So the message, there are three messages, one to the government of South Sudan, and that is to say that when you have opposition, it should be a positive thing, because opposition is like a mirror when you are driving. It allows you to see the rear and allows you to see the blind spot to the side. And then you can become a good driver because you can see around you. So opposition should be seen as a kind of a mirror to help the government, those in power, drive the country in a safe way. And opposition should not be seen as antagonistic and should not be seen as an enemy and hostile. It should be seen as a kind of advice and a guidance. So I think our government should really pay attention to what the NCF message has presented, and see whether there is a chance for us to sit down and talk about the affairs of our country with an eye to saving our country from total collapse. which is being threatened right now. So that's one message, that the national dialogue is not about power. It's not about grabbing power. It's about change. It's about reforms and positive transition. The message to the people of South Sudan, as I said earlier, is really simply to say that at the end of the day, no government anywhere in the world serves people without the people demanding the service. The government is run by politicians, and they have their own interest of their own support base, and they will do what is interested to them. The only way us ordinary citizens to get the services from the country, from the government, is for us to demand it. So let us not be silent on the problems that face us. Let us always articulate it, but do so in a peaceful way. I emphasize peaceful and non-violent methods of articulating our suffering to the government of the day, with an eye to persuading the government to see us as a mirror reflector on itself and not as enemy. The other message, of course, is to all the opposition groups that that really what matters, not just in terms of effectiveness of our opposition, but also in the way the rest of the world sees us, is for us to be united. Regardless of our differences, ideological differences, we should keep our eyes on the prize. And the prize is that we need change in our country, a positive change, a transition to a more democratic, more prosperous country. And we can only do it by being united and having one voice, rather than bickering among ourselves and competing and undercutting each other. One of us sneaking out of the opposition to go and make a deal with the government. Like we are now hearing, some people are already trying to make deals separately, individually, and be accommodated, and they will join the government and nothing will change. That sort of opposition does not help us. What helps us is unison, to speak with one voice on the matters that face South Sudan. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor. To our viewers, thank you so much for tuning in and to listen to the professor in regard to the idea he articulated. And thank you so much. I wish you Merry Christmas and Happy New Year in advance. And you all know, share love with your people and make sure you are happy, enjoy the Christmas, and give thanks to God. Professor, we really appreciate your time, and we really appreciate the invitation, accepting our invitation as Lake State Media. Actually, we believe in the statement which you said before, that the society that engage in discussion, the society that is actually in a position to design the clear future for them. That's what we believe in, and that's why we will always bring some of you to come and share your thoughts with the people of South Sudan. Lake State Media team, Isaac Tiang Paul, I know it's late now, Australia, almost 4 a.m. actually in the morning, and you're still up, making sure you monitor, you control our show. Thank you so much. We have nothing
Happy
to
Christmas and Happy New Year.
Be blessed.
God bless South Sudan.
Benyara